Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Real Life Health Show. I'm so excited about my return guest. Yes, my return guest, because I interviewed our guest today in my book over 10 years ago. His name is Rick Lambert. And Rick has been eating a raw vegan diet 100% for many, many years. And we're going to talk to him today and just get an update since we last spoke to him of how he's doing. He's going to tell you his age and how long he's been eating a raw vegan diet. And we're going to get into some questions. So, Rick, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's good to see you again, Paul. Long time.
Yes, absolutely. And how old are you right now, Rick?
93.
93. You look great, by the way. 93. So you're 100% raw vegan now for over 45 years, right?
Yeah, 46.
So 46 years ago. So what made you decide to get into eating a raw food diet?
Uh-oh, that's a long, that's a complex question, as you might expect. Oh boy, it's hard to even think of where to start. But I was vegan and mostly raw until 76. And that's when we went whole hog as a family. It was myself and my two kids and wife at the time, who since passed away. But my two kids at the time were 9 and 5.
Wow. And who told you about the raw food diet, or did you just decide to figure it out on your own?
Well, when my son was born almost 5 years earlier, about 4 years or 4 or 5 years before. Well, let's say he was born in 72, so it was 4 years before. When he was born, I already knew it was the most sensible way of eating just by sheer common sense. We were the only species of mammal that consumed cooked food. And I was familiar with all sorts of studies, pretty independent, Weston Price in particular, and so on. I didn't know about natural hygiene per se at that time. There was no internet either. And the experiments that were done at the not the Brooklyn, but the zoo in Chicago, Lincoln Park, was it Lincoln Park Zoo was one, Brookfield Zoo, I guess, in Illinois, outside of Chicago. In any event, to make a long story short, they were having all types of extraordinary veterinary bills because of all the various diseases that were manifesting among their critters. And I think it was Dr. Price or somebody like that. It might have been the guy that he teamed up with later from up in Milwaukee. But anyway, what they did was they stopped cooking all the food. And all these diseases, one after the other, just basically disappeared and went away. And they were just eating their natural fare. So that was just a manifestation of what seemed to me to be common sense. Cooking in relationship to the period of time in what we know as anthropological history was pretty short in all probability. We had to discover fire first, and then how to contain it and control it. And as Deanie said many years later, not that many years ago, out in San Diego, I call them the Three Musketeers: Dave Wolf, Steve Ireland, and Deanie, David's cousin, said cooked food is poison. It's very addictive, and it sure tastes great. And having been a gourmet for years and gotten up to almost 240 pounds as a result of this gourmet practice, I can attest to the fact that cooked food is addictive. And to this day, I still struggle, not with being raw, but just eating too much of it because I love food. And that's a problem. It's an ongoing problem. Again, I have no temptations to go raw because as a kid growing up, I was sick all the time with everything.
You mean no temptation to eat cooked food?
Pardon?
You have no temptation to eat cooked food is what you're saying.
No. In fact, I never really had much of a temptation, although so many people I know who've been in and out of or are still even in raw food are often tempted. But again, I had the experience of being sick all my life with all sorts of things, some very, very serious. So being free of that, to me, is a powerful incentive. So if the thought comes in or the temptation comes in, so to speak, one ear, one eye, it goes right out the other side, because I don't want to trade the freedom, which to me is the key to all of this freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from disease and the myriad of things that are related to disease, not the least of which is pain, suffering of all sorts.
What is your diet like now, and how has it changed over the years?
Oh, it's shifted a lot. In the beginning, 10, 15 years, I didn't use any supplements at all. And then as the years went on, and I discussed with people like Bob Avery and some others that I thought were pretty smart folks, I began to try some supplementation, and I actually felt better. And the supplements I use today, I try to make sure are derived from food stuff. They're more pricey, but they seem more effective. And again, using common sense, they ought to be, because our body was designed by the infinite wisdom of creation to be healthy. Of that, I'm convinced. There are too many manifestations or examples in our world, in life, to support that conclusion.
So what kind of supplements do you take now?
I take vitamin C. If I go through a situation where there's a lot of stress, like I don't have a chance to get enough sleep for 3 or 4 days, I'll pop a few extras. I don't take it directly. When I make smoothies, I'll dump a couple of tablets in along with a few of the dry ingredients. And then the rest of the stuff is fruit, usually, in the smoothies. And so that's how I do that. The other supplements I use the way most people do. I put 4 or 5 in a little spoon and drink something as to wash them down, and that's it.
And what are those other supplements?
Pardon?
What are the other supplements you're taking besides vitamin C?
Well, let's see if I can. I think there are about almost 9 a day that I take each morning. Well, I don't eat in the morning. I really don't eat until, well, sometimes morning, 11:30. Between 11:30 and 12:30 is my first meal. I only eat twice a day.
Okay, so.
And so what are they? Let's see. There's vitamin C, vitamin D3. I've taken up lutein in the last 4 or 5 months, and my eyesight has actually improved. And let's see, oh boy, I wasn't prepared for that because I've just got the little bottles there in the cabinet in the kitchen, and they're all arranged. So I just take them out and pop them.
Well, tell us about your diet. So you said you eat twice a day. Your first meal is around 11:30. What does your first meal usually consist of?
Well, it's 9 times out of 10, Paul, it's a smoothie. And that's because as a kid, I grew up in a standard American diet and worse. My mom was good friends of 2 candy makers in Chicago. I grew up there and in the suburbs. The Mars Candy family, who made Snickers, Three Musketeers, and all that kind of stuff. And then the Curtis folks, who made the Baby Ruth and the other candy bars. So we always had every room of the house loaded with candy bars. They were clients or patients of her dad, my grandfather, who was an MD in Oak Park, Illinois. And they lived out there. And so I had candy in amounts you wouldn't believe.
But right now, so that was then. But right now, you said you have a smoothie around 11:30 or noon every day.
Yeah, right. And so the candy thing, it really did a number on my teeth. Something awful, as you kind of.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's why the smoothies I prefer most of the time, because I haven't gone to a dentist in about 43 or 44 years. I think the last time I went was about the time I went all raw. I just couldn't find any dentists who didn't wholeheartedly support the Pasteurian germ theory. And that's a problem. I think Beauchamp had it on target more with the terrain thesis. So, they want to shoot you up and all. For years, even going to the dentist, last dentist I went to, I think, was in New York City when I went to school there. Wow. And he was a good dentist as dentists go. When I was in the Air Force later and opened my mouth 2 or 3 times a year for the dentist, which was kind of required, oftentimes the dentist would ask me, "Who did your work? It's excellent work." And they were referring to how he sculpted my teeth to the shape they were before he put the amalgam fillings in. They were all amalgam, of course. And so those all fell out as they're given to doing over time.
Yeah. And what about your second meal of the day? What time is that usually, and what do you usually eat?
Well, for years I used to eat kind of late, anywhere from 7:30 to 9:30, which I knew wasn't too good. So getting older, I've tried to be a little more religious about eating at a sensible time. So I try to chow down around between 5 and 6. I don't always succeed, but that's where I try to eat time-wise.
What do you usually eat for dinner?
Well, I have a gigantic salad, as most vegans or vegetarians tend to do, because so much of what they eat is in a salad. So, and it's a whole lot of bulk in a great big bowl, but it goes down to very little. So yeah, it's just a salad with vegetables primarily.
Sure.
Almost vegetables.
Sure. Do you eat more fruit than vegetables, or do you eat about an equal amount of both?
Well, over the 46 some years, I've eaten probably more fruit than vegetables. But by eating the vegetables, which are more difficult and take more energy to digest, that slows me down so I can sleep better. So that's why the vegetables in the evening and the fruit in the morning.
Do you eat any like nuts or seeds?
Pardon? Yeah, I do. Right. For instance, in the morning when I have the fruit, I always, for the last 4 or 5 months, I've picked Brazil nuts, because I don't have to buy organic Brazil nuts since they're all organic. So I have like 4 Brazil nuts I dump in there with the vitamin C. And also I put in the mineral, I put in magnesium.
Gaia. And what about water? What type of water do you drink?
Say again?
What kind of water do you drink?
Oh, I live out in the boonies, out in the middle of nowhere. So I have a well, but it's got a pretty high fluoride content in the water. And in the nearby town, they got a grant and filter the water there now, because the kids grew up like they were chewing betel nut from all the fluoride. Their teeth were mottled and very brittle from the fluoride. So anyway, I don't use my own water. When we first moved out here, I had a couple solar distillers, and we'd crank out about 4 or 5 gallons of water a day, which was more than we could use. We just put our tap water from the well in there, and then I had the distilled water. And for years, I drank distilled water, which I now know was a mistake. It's too acidic. It didn't do my teeth any good in the repair department for sure. And so now I add minerals from the Great Salt Lake
Sure.
to the water. Oh, and so I get purified water. I get it up in a town 30 miles north of here, either at the Walmart dispenser, it's reverse osmosis, or there's a big unit up there that you can put quarters in and get ice or the same purified water. And then I just add the minerals to it. And I have a big glass 5-gallon water jug that sits atop a dispenser. And so that's my water supply.
And do you ever check your, go to the doctor and check your blood work?
No, I don't. Okay. I go to a doctor every 2 years for my flight physical because I'm required to do that. But otherwise I don't.
What do you mean your flight physical? Are you a pilot?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you still fly planes at 93?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you're healthy.
I'm active with the CAP, and we do CD missions. That's counter drug missions here because we're right on the border with Mexico.
Wow. What's your current weight and height?
I have shrunk. I'm not atypical in that department. I was 5'11", and I'm about a little over 5'10".
And what's your weight?
Max out at 150, and I try to be under 145. It fluctuates by 5 pounds or so any given week, but when it hits 150, it's time to kick in and fast for a day or so.
So do you fast often, or have you fasted often over the years?
Oh yeah, I did. I shot for a 40-day, and I think I did 38 days after I went raw.
Okay, and besides that 38-day water fast, have you done any other fasting over the years, just a day here and there?
Oh yeah. Every year I fast 3 or 4 times at least, but not the lengthy fast. Maybe 3-4 days at the most.
Sure.
That's a kind of a reset, to get my weight's gone. It's gotten too high, and I just get the weight back again, and also just clean out, because no matter how hard I try to eat just all organic, I have to go out to luncheons 3 or 4 times a month for meetings and so on. And it's not organic. I do bring my own salad dressing. I never use the provided salad dressing.
And you say you're, so how often do you sleep? How much do you sleep every night?
Well, I try to get 7 or 8 hours. I don't always succeed. For years, I probably went 10 or 15 years with 4 and 5 hours. And I don't think that was a good idea, really. I think we need a little more sleep. So I try to sleep more now than I did previously.
Sure. And you said you have children. Do any of them eat a healthy diet, or not really?
Yeah, they're both vegans, but they're not all raw. My daughter's been raw more. My son, as I mentioned, was raw from birth because I knew it was the way to eat, but I wasn't ready to, take the leap myself. And it was 4 years after he was born that all of us went raw at the same time down in Florida. But I was living in Arizona when he was born. And again, for him, he had nothing to give up.
Sure.
You know, he was born, and so why not go all raw? In fact, my wife wanted to introduce him to some cooked food, which we were eating when he was about 3 years old. His first cooked food, she had prepared a nice vegan meal. Actually, it was a vegetarian meal. I wasn't a vegan at that time. And anyway, we had a delicious baked sweet potatoes as on the table. And so she took a spoon of mashed sweet potato, which was just absolutely scrumptiously delicious, and made sure it was nice and cool, room temperature, and gave him that. And he looked kind of startled. And next thing we knew, I was covered with pieces of sweet. He spit it out. His instincts were really pretty good.
Wow.
So that was the end of that experiment.
Yes. And did your wife eat raw vegan for a little while?
No, she never really did. No. We got divorced when he was 4. We've been together over 20 years. I met her in New York City when I went to Columbia, up the street from you, or down the road, I'm not sure.
So you went to so you guys got divorced after 4 years with your son, and then you continued or started to eat a raw vegan diet, and she ate whatever she ate.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it was cooked vegetarian. She went vegetarian. We'd gone vegetarian way back in let's see, he was born in 64, in December of 64. And in 65, we were pretty much mostly, and then within a year, all vegetarian.
Wow. And so what about exercise? Do you exercise currently?
No, that's an area that I keep making resolutions, typically about every January 1st, to start exercising. And I've done it on and off, but out here, there are no tennis courts, for instance. And if there were, there'd probably be nobody to play with. When I was last in California, lived in a condo in North San Diego County, and it was put together by a couple of tennis nuts. So we had tennis courts, wonderful tennis courts, and I played a lot. But I left there in 2000 or late 99. And that was the last time I did a lot of exercise. So it's been about 22 years, and I really need to do it somehow. If there were a gym down the street and I were in the metro area where I could join a gym, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But I was a coach and very athletic when I was younger, and I really missed the exercise.
Sure. So what's your advice at 93 years old for people that are getting into eating a raw food diet?
What's my advice for them?
Yes.
Keep doing it. Eat raw food, because I think we were designed to have, just like all the other animals out there, designed not to have cooked or denatured food, but raw food. It makes sense. We're just
people that are getting. Do you think there's a big difference between 100% raw and just eating like 90% raw?
Yeah, I think my daughter put it real well one time, and she answered somebody. It must have been about 15 years ago, I remember, because even after she grew up and went out on her own, she went long stretches all raw and on her own. My son has never gone all raw since he left the nest. And one thing about being all raw, we had no doctor's bills unless for broken bones. Both the kids were very active. They spent most of their remaining childhood years in the home in Malibu, California. And we were very physically active then, gardening and so forth. And they were horseback enthusiast and competed a lot, which is a lot of exercise. Just taking care of the horses alone is plenty of exercise. And the gardening too, you know, working with your hands in the soil, bending over, lifting, running wheelbarrows around the place and so forth. That was, you know, just a healthy lifestyle, more so than where I am now out in New Mexico.
Okay. And so you're still working, you said, at 93, you're still working as a pilot.
Yeah, well, I'm not getting paid to fly now. I'm not doing it commercially. In fact, the only time I was a professional pilot per se was in the Air Force after I graduated and did my military gig.
Sure, sure. Okay.
I've been a commercial pilot for ages, for, I don't know, 70 years or something, but I just have never really used it. Like when I was in the electronics business, we had company airplane. I flew it all the time and so on, but I was getting paid not for flying the airplane. I just like to, you know, go where I wanted to go on my own in the company airplane. And I didn't get paid for that. I got paid for doing the work in the company.
Why do you think, Rick, some people don't succeed at eating a raw food diet, raw food diet?
I could only speculate, you know, why that might be. The temptation to do what other people are doing is probably part of our human psyche, I guess. And so I think that's part of it. The temptations are all over the place. As I said, I'm lucky in a way because having been sick all my life so much and missed so many wonderful things I'd planned to do because I'd be sick, sure enough, when the day came to go to the party or whatever it was, even a date when I was in high school, you know, I'd be sick so I couldn't go out. I was miserable. So again, not being tempted because of that background is a big advantage, it turns out. It didn't do me any good physiologically, obviously, because it did a lot of damage, some of which, like to my teeth, is irreparable.
So you contribute what's going on with your teeth to how you ate before you went on a raw diet?
Oh, I know that for sure, because I didn't give it a second thought, but all my teeth were full of amalgam fillings when I went to college.
Sure. And how's about your family? Do you have any brothers or sisters?
My only 100% natural sister passed away in her early 40s. I have a step sister who lives, well, she lives in New York State now. She finally left New York City. It got so bad and moved upstate. She was a shrink there. And then I've got a brother and two sisters who live in Colorado, and they're my dad's children after he got remarried and divorced my mom. So.
And what's their ages?
Pardon?
Are they still alive?
Yes, they all are. They're a lot younger than I am.
Okay. Well, how old did your dad and your mom live to? Did they live in old age?
Pardon?
How old did mom and dad live to?
My mom was very sick in the last 10 or 15 years with cancer and on and off. She'd been a smoker most of her life, and she died in her 80s. She finally realized that I must be onto something, and so she would take my advice. She was living in Scottsdale, Arizona. She came out after I left there. I'd been extolling the virtues of living in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. So she finally came shortly after I left and went to Florida. But anyway, she got sick, and the Mayo Clinic had a operation there in Scottsdale, Arizona, where she lived. And so she went there, and I was able to convince a couple of young doctors that they should try a Japanese technique, for instance, a cryogenic technique. she had liver cancer. And so I printed out the papers of the study translated into English, and they were actually willing to do it. So instead of going in and operating with opening her up and going after her liver, they were willing to try this experiment. So they injected liquid nitrogen into the tumors, and it sure did work. It killed the tumors. But again, she'd done a lot of damage over the years, drinking and smoking and so on. But it gave her another 5 or 6 years. And I took her to the Gerson operation down in TJ. And that was kind of intensive, as you know, I'm sure. And I used to go down there oftentimes. I like to talk to the patients and get their stories.
Sure.
And that was all going on before you and I first met out in Southern California. And then, the final thing, I took her down to meet Stanislaw Brzezinski in Houston, Texas, and with his anti-neoplastons. And that really seemed to do quite well. She went on that for about the 3 final years. And then, but she didn't like it because it was very cumbersome, you know, doing that blood thing.
Yeah.
With the anti-neoplastons. And it also smelled like an event porta potty.
Wow. Wow.
All the urine odor. So, because that's where he got the anti-neoplastons from urine.
Wow. What about your dad? At what age did he live to?
He hit over 100.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we always, I've got my mom's physiological makeup more, except the male version, than my dad. My dad was real tall, and his mother, who basically raised him, he was born in London, and she was in show business and came over and worked on Broadway. And when he was a teenager, and she was a big nut on salads, I remember. And we always joked about my dad that he kept eating lady food. He was a very macho guy. But I remember growing up that salads were something that women ate, not guys. It wasn't macho food at all.
Wow, wow. So
anyway, so it looks like he got the last laugh, because all that, he had a habit of eating salads from his mom. So he always ate a lot of salads. So I would say that's probably what it is. But she did quite well too. She was doing fine until she fell down some stairs at my dad's house in her later years north of Chicago in the dead of winter. And there's no heat in the basement. And she broke a couple of bones, very steep stairs. And she was down there and nobody could hear her. Nobody was home for about 6 or 7 hours. She darn near froze down there, and had one fracture was a compound fracture. And against all her violent objections, they carted her off to the hospital, where in a couple of days she was dead. They pumped her full of antibiotics and all kinds of stuff. And she had dated a couple of doctors when she was in London, and she had absolutely zero respect for doctors and never saw them. And except for the salad, she wasn't a health nut. My mother's mother, on the other hand, was a health nut, the one married to the MD, the doctor. And we used to joke about her because she was one of the first subscribers to Rodale Press. And she was one of the first Americans to own what was called a blender.
Wow, wow.
Fred Waring down in Pennsylvania, you know, the musician, invented the first blender, the Waring blender.
Wow.
And she got one of those, and she'd make these gosh awful concoctions. She'd put some water in, some orange juice, a couple of eggs whole, you know, shell and all, and make this stuff. And if we were sniffling or had a cold or something, she'd give us this stuff and I almost would upchuck. It was horrific. So we learned to tell her we were feeling great, even if we weren't, because we didn't get that medicine.
So
her husband oftentimes couldn't handle a patient, or, you know, because he believed in all the medicine that he had learned about in medical school. And he came from poor stock, Irish, and he went to University of Chicago Medical School, working full-time all night long at the post office. And then during the day, he went to medical school. And so he was just totally inundated with all that, worked real hard, believed it all. And of course, it didn't work a lot of the time. And then he would be very depressed. And oftentimes my grandmother, his wife, would take the patient aside and make suggestions, which worked. You know, and she'd say, don't tell the doctor, you know, about this. So that was kind of funny.
So Rick, it's a pleasure to speak to you, and there's so much great information. I know we could talk for such a long time, but I don't want to hold you up. Let me ask you this before we end the interview. Walk us through your day yesterday, about what time you got up, what you ate, and what you did. And is that a typical day for you? Give us an example yesterday. What time did you wake up yesterday?
Let's see. I think I woke up about 6:30 or 7 o'clock.
And the night before you went to sleep, 8 hours before or so, around 10 o'clock?
About 7, I think, the night before, Thursday night. Yeah, because.
Okay.
Wednesday night. Yeah. So yesterday was Thursday. Today's Friday.
Yes.
So I had to go to a meeting. I took a whole lot of photographs and some videos. It was the Columbus Historical Society, a sister organization to the group that I run.
So you got up at 7:30, you said, yesterday?
And then dug into the computer pretty much right away. I had a couple of things to post and some other film editing or video editing I had to do, and I haven't posted yet. And then I had these two lady friends from up in Deming, 30 miles north. It's the nearest large town. And they drove down, they're active with this group, and they picked me up and in their car, we carpooled down 3 miles south into the village of Columbus. And they had a meeting, elected officers and so forth. And I took photos, which I like to do, and videos for them. And then we got home about 7:30 or 8 o'clock. They dropped me off. And so I ate a late dinner last night.
Well, did you eat anything during the daytime?
Yeah, I just had the smoothies at about noon or 1 o'clock.
You make them there, or did you bring them with you?
Oh, no. I was home most of the day until they picked me up and we went to the Historical Society meeting.
Okay. So you had your smoothie around 1 o'clock, and then you had a late dinner. What did you have for dinner?
Let's see. I can tell you what I had for dinner. Let's see. I've got a big giant bowl, and I had a whole avocado. It's a round Haas. Out here, we don't have the choices we did in California, or even you. It's either Haas or Haas. That's about it. You know, in California, we had about a dozen varieties you could have of avocados, which I love. So I had a whole round Haas, which has a big pit, the round ones. So there wasn't a lot of meat in it. So I had the whole thing instead of half of one. And so I chopped that up and I put that in there, and I had a bunch of spring mix, 4 or 5 big handfuls of spring mix. And then I cut it up so it's easier to chew and doesn't get over my beard, you know, like the big leaves tend to do. And then let's see, what else did I put in there? I put some vinegar in, raw vinegar, and and I put in some shredded carrot, some beans, some string beans, and some peas, a little corn. By the way, I on the high lectin foods, I'm going easier on those than I used to because I had arthritis real badly when I was younger in my 30s. It deformed my fingers. It was so bad. And then
That was before you went on a raw vegan diet. Yes.
yes, right. And back then, if you went to all the experts, they said you can't cure arthritis, but we can treat it. You know, pain relief and that sort of thing. And of course, I got rid of it completely, but the damage had been done to my fingers. But anyway, and then here about 3 or 4 years ago, my hands were beginning to get a little stiff again. Nothing like before. When I got arthritis, it was preceded by gout attacks first.
Oh, wow.
In my 30s. I had all kinds of cardiovascular problems. I mean, really serious stuff.
And then what time did you go to sleep last night?
So I probably hit the sack 11:30, 12 o'clock. Oh, last night?
Yeah.
12:30, 1 o'clock, I think.
Okay, that's because you had your meeting and you were a little late. Okay.
Yeah.
So you pretty much you have a smoothie for breakfast and a salad in the afternoon for dinner, for the most part.
It's pretty mundane, actually, although the salads have a lot of variety in them. And I even have a variety, although there's staples that go into my smoothies. I got rid of the floaters in my eyes by upping the pineapple content. That worked for me.
Are you able to grow any of your food or grow sprouts or no?
Well, I did until about 2006. And then I got so busy doing things that I couldn't tend to the garden. But I'm starting the gardening up again because I think we're all going to need to do that in the next year or so. Yes. We're having, all these national problems are getting out of hand. So I planted a bunch of fruit trees this short. Yeah, go ahead.
No, what were you saying? I was joking. I said, I don't know what you're talking about with all the problems, but I was joking. So what were you saying about fruit trees?
Oh, I planted some fruit trees when we first came out here in '99. I had hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of fruit trees in pots from this exotic nursery in San Diego. And we filled a truck almost completely with those. And then after I was here about a year or so, then I had to go back to California for 3 years. And I instructed a neighbor on how to water and keep all these trees going. And they had a brown thumb or something. I don't know what worked.
Oh, that's terrible.
I lost all those trees. But anyway, I've just planted 3 fig trees.
Nice. 3 fig trees.
Yeah, so I'm going to try persimmon, even some avocado, cold resistant.
Yes. And you're in New Mexico, you said, yeah?
Yes, right on the Mexican border.
Oh, wow. Wow, you're really down there. Well, I so appreciate you taking the time out to speak to me. And everybody, I know everybody was wondering since I wrote my book, how you've been and where you've been and what you're up to. And I'm 93 years old and you're still going strong. No problems, no health issues, correct? Other than your teeth.
Yeah, just the teeth problem is the main one. And then not having the physical strength that I did when I was more active and exercising.
Sure. But other than that, you feel good? You don't have anything wrong you don't believe?
Oh, yeah, no, I feel, I have plenty of energy. To me, sickness is enervation. And so I've been able to be quite energetic. And I'm thankful for that, for sure. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I didn't have as much energy per se as even now. So,
wow. Well, Rick, it's been a pleasure to speak to you, everybody. This is Rick Lambert, and he's you might be able to find him on social media. I think he's on Facebook, and you could see him on I don't know if he's on Instagram, but I know he doesn't get there often. But if you have comments or questions for Rick, just post them below the video, and maybe we'll do a follow-up with some questions for him. And is there anything you want to say before we close the interview?
No, except that if anybody would like to be very healthy, I think one of the cornerstones of good health, to realize your potential for good health, is to not cook your food. It's that simple. I don't promote it or anything in any way. But there's an old statement, perfect freedom is perfect abeyance to perfect law, made by the famous German philosopher Hegel. And so I one day thought, I think when we were living in Malibu, I did like to modify that natural laws. So perfect abeyance to perfect law made sense. Humans can't have a perfect law, of course. So I came up with raw is law. And Dini went and coined that thing and registered a domain.
Wow.
But raw is law. So I really believe that raw is law. I mean, it's that simple. So everybody's in a different state. Everybody is biologically and otherwise unique. But I think there are commonalities. And one of them is if we eat the way we were designed to consume what we call food, then the more naturally it's done and the more simply it's done, the better. And cooking food renders it easier to eat and very addictively tasty, but it wreaks havoc. I'm quite convinced of that from my own experience as well as that of a bunch of other people. When we went all raw, we didn't know anybody that was all raw. Later on, I ran into Herbert Shelton, by the way, not personally, but his writings, which I thought were fantabulous.
Yeah. Wow. Now, what about, I meant to ask you, vitamin B12. Do you take vitamin B12?
Oh, yes, I do. And I've only done that for about 5 years as a result of some of the M2N group under Bob Avery, Many to Many group. And I respected Dr. Vetrano a lot. And I never seemed to manifest the symptoms of vitamin B12 deficiency that I read up about. And I love mushrooms. I eat mushrooms all the time. Last night, there were a lot of mushrooms in the salad. So maybe that's where I get the intrinsic factor. I have no idea. I'm just guessing at that. But anyway, so now I do take B12. It's not that expensive, and so I do take B12.
Right.
As a vegan.
Yes. Well, you're an inspiration. You're really an inspiration. I appreciate your time, and everybody post your questions below, and I'll try to do a follow-up with Rick. Rick, thank you again, sir, for being here.
My pleasure. It's great to see you, Paul.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.